Thanks for tuning into the For Those Made to Do podcast. We are your hosts, Mandy Sahota
and Bianca Pavel. This podcast is all about the doers who have achieved career success in the UAE and the stories that go with it.
Hi. In this episode, we're sitting down with Dean Namrata Kamath from Hult International Business School. What comes across is that she lives, breathes everything higher education, and her passion really shines through. This is something that we get to experience every day, and we're so excited to share it with you as well. You'll notice throughout the conversation themes around critical thinking, using our own unique human lens, and the importance of filtering through the massive information we have access to as learners.
We're asking Namrata to answer some of the biggest questions pondering over higher education, and unsurprisingly, she delivers a thought-provoking conversation. If you're curious to know how business schools eliminate fear about the future, how AI can be used for coursework, and which mindsets are the most valued in the MENA region today, then give this episode a listen. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome everyone. We're so excited to record our first episode of For Those Made to Do, a series that's been in the works for a few months and that we're very proud to share with all Hult students and alumni and anyone else working in business in the GCC region. And we couldn't have asked for a better guest to kick off the series other than the Dean of the Hult Dubai campus, Namrata Kamath. Now, welcome to our podcast and thanks for accepting our invitation. How are you today?
I'm good. I am recovering from a cold, so I probably don't have my best radio voice, but we're going to wing it, aren't we?
We're
just going to wing it. Yeah. I'm very excited, actually, because y'all had told me about this idea a wee bit ago, and now we're here.
Amazing. So let's start by giving the listeners a bit of an introduction to who you are and what is your mission or what are you most proud of?
Okay, introduction. Here we go. So I was born and raised here in this brilliant city. I grew up in the smallest of towns called Dubai, which is no longer a small town. I did my bachelor's degree in human resources and realized I didn't want to work with humans as much in that capacity. So I moved on to the area of education, higher education, and found my love for higher education since my master's degree all the way through till now. That's about over 15, 17 years. I don't know of experience. I don't like saying things like that. It ages you a little and makes you scared of how old we're getting. But other than that, so I'm currently in a doctoral program, which has been the most humbling and awesome experience. It also helps me relate to some of our part-time students who are working and studying and doing the whole thing. I'm in a doctoral program, it's organizational change, and I'm currently working on understanding the part vulnerability plays in leadership. And I'm looking at this through the lens of agency, voice, authenticity, all of the fun things. And as it shapes, I will tell you more. What is my mission and what am I most proud of? I am actually very proud of Hult. And I'm not just saying that. I mean this. I was here 10 years ago and I've just seen the leaps and bounds that the school is taking in order to remain as relevant as possible, to remain current, and the agile nature. I never thought higher education could be as agile until I made it to Hult. So I'm just really proud to be a Hultian, really, as I come into that decade.
For those who are unfamiliar with Hult International Business School, can you tell us a little bit more about the school? And let's not forget, this is about you.
Okay. So we'll keep it short and cheerful. We are a global business school. We are located at 4 spots. So we are going west to east. That is San Francisco, Boston, London, and Dubai. We offer very, very cool and innovative business programs, so ranging from MBAs, Master of International Business, marketing, business analytics, finance. We even do an innovation program, an entrepreneurship program out of San Francisco. We are currently working really hard at ensuring that our students are focused on impact and the impact that they have on the business world. And like I was saying earlier, we are a very agile higher educational institution, which allows us to remain very current with the times and change very, very quickly. That makes us very unique. I think we're also very interactive kind of space. So if you are thinking about a Hult program, we ensure that it is a very experiential style of learning in the room. So you are meant to engage, which I think is also very cool.
Not just in the class, right?
No.
Either.
No, so we simulate the real world, basically, in the classroom, which I think is very important.
So looking at the MENA region where Hult is based, what is business education like in this area? And what have you seen as the key trends in the last 12 months?
So business education has, I think in the region, yes, and globally, there are a few things that are coming out of it, right? Thematically. So you're hearing a lot about sustainability. The planet needs our attention and our love, I think a little bit more. AI, nobody can talk about higher education without AI. And that's been a conversation, I think, all over the region. Schools are trying to figure out this beast that's kind of come out, which we knew was there. We knew we could kind of see it. And then now it's in the forefront, and figure out what is the right way to go about this as educators. We want to tell people that it's okay, but is it okay? And we're trying to like navigate through some of that. So those are definitely some of their themes. I think in general, there has been a need to reckon with how the business world has evolved because of the advent of, whether we say it's AI, and it's not just solely that. I think generationally people are changing, right? So we've moved from the boomers to like myself, a millennial. Our work style and ethic is completely different from what we're transitioning into with the Gen Zs. We see it in the classroom. We see how they're learning. So I think a big conversation that I've noticed is how we are teaching our students. So how are people consuming content? What do people see as absolute truth? And where is that information coming from? That changes a lot of how you can converse with a student about what they know, what is fact, what is opinion. These things, these lines are blurring a little bit more because we've had so much more access. So when I went to grad school, yes, we had the internet, but we didn't use it for everything. And now that's kind of our first resources. Oh, let me just Google that and see what comes up. And so I think that conversations have been around reckoning with the external forces such as climate change and what that's bringing, AI and the metaverse and all of these things, but also the human, I don't want to call it a problem. I think it's more of a evolution of what this generation is going to bring about. It's very exciting and it's very cool. And yes, as millennials, we'll make the jokes about what the Gen Zers are going to do, but actually they're on top of their game. Like I think they know what they want. They're a little bit more woke, for lack of
And
better
more
words.
assertive about it.
Assertive, 100%. And you can have some really interesting debates with them. Sometimes they're very easy to debunk because of where they got the information. But sometimes you're like, hey, you know what? That's actually a really good point. So I think that the world of education has been, we've had to reckon with quite a few things. How are you holding the attention in the classroom to how is that person then leaving this campus and impacting the business world? So it's quite that journey that they're going through.
So let's talk about the beast. Artificial intelligence, and particularly ChatGPT and generative AI.
Okay. We can't go a day without it, can we?
Not a single day without
It affects us
ChatGPT.
all.
Yes.
So we know that many schools have taken a very strong stance against it, and some of them have banned students from bringing their laptops into the classroom, and others are now doing stronger assessments to detect plagiarism and to see where ChatGPT has been used for coursework. So has AI prompted any discussions of that sort at Hult in terms of both teaching in the classroom but also assessing a student's work?
Oh, have they? So I have a few views and thoughts on this beast, as we were calling it. There is a certain amount of trepidation, I understand, as an educational institution when it comes to this notion of can we use AI? And I think we are missing an opportunity because if we don't allow it at school, and I get it, at schools we're trying to test, do you know, right? Do you know what you know? And having said that, if we let our future business leaders out into the workforce without knowing how to responsibly and effectively use AI, are we creating the most impactful business leaders? I don't believe we are. So we can run away from the problem. And I had read a lot of schools were banning it. They were like, let's get back to using paper exams and, all of these things that I was like, oh, I get where that's coming from, because you want to test the ethical kind of grounds of, hey, do they know what revolves around that subject? So when I think back to it, it's the same conversation that I went to an Indian school, and in math, we weren't allowed calculators. In accounting, so I get to 12th grade, we were told you don't get to use calculators. So they'd give us an extra piece of paper and we had to do math. So now you're balancing accounts of like millions and millions of dollars. Well, we were doing it in rupees, so lakhs and crores of rupees, but on a piece of paper, which in hindsight, nobody does. Nobody does past a certain point. You use calculators. And then I went to college in the States and they were like, get a cheat sheet, write out your formulas if you want to bring it to the exam and use your scientific calculator, plug in your formulas. And I was like, isn't that cheating? And I remember I asked the faculty and they're like, it's not cheating. We're not testing, hey, do you know how to use this formula? Because you could look that up. We're testing, do you know what to do with it? And I think it's the exact same conversation, but there is a little trepidation because it's new and it's big.
Yeah.
And I don't think we as humans now know the width and breadth of what we are working with. And I think that I always like, when I have a little bit of fear of it, I bring it back to the calculator, where I was like so frustrated as a student that I could do all the work right and get the points for the work right. But because my math went wrong, because I was doing it really quickly by hand, I could lose points on an answer, right? And I know it's not about grades and all of that, and I give that speech to students, but the frustration of it as a student, was I really learning, right? Do you learn to test or do you learn to know? And I think they're two different things. And I think we as Hult are recognizing that we're not here to fight it. We are here to implement it in a way that is ethical, that is moral, and teach the students to say, it's like an encyclopedia, right? Encyclopedia. What year? What was the last?
Encarta.
So I had, like the Tell Me Whys and these other encyclopedias, which we would use initially in high school. And all we're saying is if you're using this tool, you need to tell us this came from this tool and this was paraphrased from this tool. I think that's fair. And I think that our faculty are currently working on what's a really creative way to actually implement AI into their assignments.
Because this is the thing, right? It's what you were going back to saying, like, do you know how to use it? Because my role is in careers. I'm reviewing people's LinkedIns, cover letters, CVs, and I can detect from a million miles away if they've used ChatGPT, because actually the way they're communicating about themselves, their value, comes across really generic, and that authenticity is lost. So what instructions are you even putting in ChatGPT in the first place? I feel like if we teach them how to use it, they can actually leverage it. Whereas right now, it's just not really having the impact that it needs if they're not able to use it in the right way and communicate with the tool like they need to, which is what I'm seeing as it's kind of emerging and it's becoming more common.
So I'm a student as well at the moment. I'm terrified of even putting a thought into the beast, because I'm like, then the beast is going to spit it out to someone else as the AI's
as
thought.
its own, yeah.
So I'm one of those people that is kind of operating, I've had to be blatantly honest, of fear of using it when I'm on the student end, because I want to get my doctorate and I don't want to get caught. Having said that, the way to use it for me, because I'm in a qualitative research program, for example, could be I'm being tasked with reading a bunch of philosophers that some of them you could read and you're like, I don't know what you're saying. Like if I had to be like, you have to be some kind of very evolved being to be like, I could understand Foucault on at the first shot. Like that's not happening. It's tough. So you read it, you don't completely get it. And then you perhaps go to, this is just me making up an example on the spot, you go into the beast and you're like, hey beast, can you please just maybe give me a summary of this? And then you read that and you're like, okay, this is what makes sense. And then you can go back to the text you read. So that's how I would perhaps look to use it. I think the mistake that students are making is that's your first resource. So immediately, let me just go into ChatGPT and say, can you give me a summary of, Plato's Apology? No, read Plato's Apology. It's brilliant. It's difficult, but read it and then go in and say, can you give me a summary to say, hey, did I get it? How cool would that be? And then saying, hey, actually, I don't agree with ChatGPT because it's saying this, but I didn't read it that way, right? So I think we can teach students to debate it, argue it, because I don't think it's a finite knowledge base. I think it's mammoth, because it's this huge machine learning tool, but it is still finite. We are the ones that are making it infinite by putting more and more and more and more into it. So challenge it. We've also seen actually, a faculty and I were having a discussion about it. And if you say, write me this paper with AP8 sources, the first couple of sources, you're like, okay, those are real. The rest are not really. So it's predicting some of it as well. And we just have to be very mindful of which parts are predicted, which are real. And students have to learn that their thought matters equally.
So it sounds like critical thinking is one of those core skills that the students need to have in order to use these new tools to then go as a starting point and then go and build up from there. So on that point of skills and competency building, what are the skills in most demand right now in the UAE? And what are the complementing mindsets that employers are looking for at a junior and senior level?
I think to all encompass, I would say there's some advanced digital and human skills that are, obviously coveted at the moment. There's a decline in the manual physical kind of roles, high increase in high cognitive skills such as critical thinking, creativity, decision making, complex information processing, which again, it'll be very interesting to see where some of this goes and if we were having this conversation in 10 years. So roles that can be easily automated, right? So we know with accounting, we have a lot of very, very smart software, risk forecasting, etc. There is a decrease in that. Having said that, I'm also a believer that, yes, some of these roles, there's going to be an offset where it's going to be automated and the workforce is going to move in a direction of it's faster. But there is a piece of this, we're coming back to it, the AI piece. I had a conversation with a friend and we were having this discussion where this thought came up of we have become as humans perhaps more efficient than we're meant to be. And it's resulted in this culture of burnout. And perhaps some of this automation is meant to relieve us of that. So we're able to indulge in the more creative, critical piece that we don't want to leave to the machine, right? That we want humans to be a part of. And so having said that, I believe the human economy is still very, very prevalent. And we need, the more we engage with tech and all of the fun stuff that's coming out of it, the more we need the beauty that is the human mind, right? Present in that mix, because we need to get smart about, hey, this is a way for us to, some of us, we've always, even though it's one job title, we know we've been doing 2 to 3 jobs. And if one of those jobs is like, hey, it can be automated, then we've got more space mentally to do 2 jobs, right? So 2 jobs still, but you know what I mean?
Just to kind of circle back on this kind of phrasing you use, human economy. And I think if we go back to how it relates right now in the UAE, I've heard you describe before that this region is a relational culture. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, it is a culture where people matter, which is a beautiful thing, right? So who some people look at it from a fairly negative lens of, oh, who and Vasta, and they use all of these words. But I actually think if we were to look around the world, we would be amiss to say who you knew, the relationships you form, the hard work you put into other people hasn't paid off. And that's the more positive way to look at it. So I think this culture is heavy on building relationships and maintaining those relationships. So trust plays a huge role. When people meet you, they want to be able to say, hey, I trust you. And I know that, you're going to have my best interest at heart. Not to say that it's all very pure and beautiful. And of course things happen, but it is a culture that values the person in front of them and the relationship you're building with the person in front of you. So I think that it is very important that when you come out here, if you're an introvert like me, you have to break out of that a little and you have to network and you have to, go to the conferences and go to the trade shows and talk to people. And it's exhausting. Like I said, if you're an introvert like me, it is very exhausting. But there is benefit to that. And I think and I'm sure the two of you are better versed at this than I am, but when we're having conversations, and I know this, I've heard this from everyone that's been, I used to do careers at Hult a lifetime ago, I would always say that we are sometimes told that if you got a job through that little connection, or, let's just say your father knows someone who's like, hey, I could get you the interview. There's a sense of shame that's kind of attached to that. And I don't believe that, because I believe everyone gets something from somebody because they knew someone at some point, right? So I think that you could get the interview. Getting the job is up to you. And that's where the pride needs to be. And why can't it be that your network is like, hey, look at what my dad built, look at what my friend built, look at what the career advisor at Hult built, right? They're the ones that got me the in. It's okay. It's okay to be proud of those connections. So I think we have to rebrand. You have to rebrand a little bit of the Vasta and what that means.
Absolutely. And we talk a lot in careers about the hidden job market, which is when somebody has a role and they go to all the people they know before they post it online. So this is the common practice, because you always want to get a CV from somebody that comes from a trusted source. So you're going to go to your colleagues, to your friends, to your family, to your neighbors, to everyone you know. And once you've exhausted that, then you're going to go and put that vacancy up online. And you're going to accept applications from people you don't know.
So when you invest in a person, and we've all managed teams, we've all hired for teams, when you invest in a person, that is not just, it's not just money, because that's what people, it's time. Like it's so much time, so much effort. And the same way you wouldn't just go and invest in something without doing the research. This is just research. Do I trust that the person's going to be worth that time and effort and money? And so to your point, like, let's rebrand it a little and say it's okay to use a relation to get into something because there's trust there. So of course, people are going to say, hey, I like them because I trust them. And that's okay.
And I think in this region in particular, the kind of Hult mantra of Hult hires Hult, I think is kind of 10 times amplified because of this whole thing of people are hiring based on relationships, because the risk of hiring wrong is so high because this place is a lot smaller than, say, some of the more mature kind of places in the world like the UK and the US. So if you make a wrong decision, the impact on your business is going to be 10 times more visible. So I think that's absolutely what we're drumming into students from the day they start to the day they leave. So
leave your homes.
Yeah.
Get out on the street.
Off campus.
Yeah.
Out and network.
Out and about. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I wanted to share some research with you. So McKinsey are predicting that 400 million workers globally will change their occupations in the next 10 years. And business schools are uniquely situated to respond to the shifts coming to the future of work. What's your take on these changes? And how do you see the role of business schools?
I think the role of business schools is to eliminate some of the fear. So we as schools have the opportunity to work with some of the greatest minds in our faculty. A lot of these faculty are actively researching some of the things we're talking about, right? How is the world changing because something as big as AI is coming in and making us all shift everything we're going to do? And I think sometimes our decisions are very short-sighted. So the role of the business school, like I said, is to rely on some of this expertise. And we're very blessed at Hult that we have quite a few of them in that space of the future of work and AI, and have the conversations with the students for them to recognize how much of what we know is real and how much of it is fear-based. Because I think it's our job to eliminate that fear. And the way we do that is with fact. So sometimes things are bigger because we haven't been able to cut them down into bite-sized pieces and say, this is the actual fact. Because we're going to bring it back, ChatGPT can actually do for you versus what you think it can do for you. And a lot of us, like I said, I'm very averse to some of this. I keep thinking like Siri is going to become Skynet. And Siri is Skynet. And then that's it. We're in the Terminator times and it's going to be some dystopian world where we're all sent out to the field with spears, to win the Hunger Games. So it's all just, it's very interesting of how much fear is kind of based when we don't know, right? In the unknown. And I think our roles as business schools is to shift that and say, yes, you can still be scared, but be scared with fact. Be scared because not be scared because you don't. And I think that is a really important role. And it comes back to, I think, Bianca, what you were asking earlier which is why we as a school can't be seen to shy away from it in the first place. If that's what's going to affect the business world, if that's what's going to affect the scope of jobs, we can't be seen shying away from it because we need to make them ready for what is out there. So they might come into the business school saying, I want to be an accountant. Whose job is it to tell them they do not have the longevity that they might have had if they started this career 20 years ago? It's our job. And it's not just the job of the two of you in careers and corporate relations. It's the job of the finance faculty who's going to talk about what the nature of that field is at the moment, what parts of it they have to do as humans and what parts they don't, so that they can know. Because I believe that these occupations will change and they will evolve. So who is going to tell them how that's going to happen? We as a school, I think we do a really good job at focusing on the future, right? Because we talk about impact as part of our mission statement to say impact, like we drill it in to the students. We tell them to think about that at the start of the year at immersion. We try and incorporate it into every one of their courses. But also additionally, we run challenges where we're bringing live clients into the classroom to say, hey, this is our concern 10 years from now. We worked recently with a client who was talking about the future of banking, because they know that if we don't catch up, we're going to be left behind as a bank. And I think that same mindset, what is the future of education, ed tech, etc. I think that business schools, there's also been an opportunity with the pandemic that we now have been banking on. But it's also been very interesting to see how comfortable schools have gotten to say, oh, now we've got it. Now we know the formula. We know a virtual, we know a hybrid. And I'm like, is that all? Shouldn't we be evolving? So it is very interesting to see how we also relax to think we know. So I think staying humble and with the times and using the expertise we have access to is very important.
I want to bring you back to something that you mentioned at the very beginning and pretty much throughout our conversation today, which is impact. How do we ensure that impact is top of the agenda for every person that leaves a business school today? Because no matter whether you're going to be a salesperson or a marketeer or an ops director, your business is going to be tasked with making an impact, and your consumers will want to see your impact and where you stand. So how does Hult operate in that space?
That's a really good question. We are currently, for this upcoming academic year, we've done this before, and we're working toward creating a slightly more intentional ESG, as we call it, stream into every program. So every program needs to talk about what it means to be a responsible finance director someday, or marketeer, or a strategist. I think that the sustainability, if we can talk about that one, especially with SDGs, when you look at them, you're like, is this ever going to get better? Like when you look at it all on one board, you're like, this is every problem. And I know that we had a conversation on this campus with one of our incoming faculty about how is like women and kind of equality still on there, like when the planet's almost on fire and we're trying to make sure people have food to eat, but hey, let's just treat women. So when we look at it on that larger scale, it's very, very scary. You're just like, is this ever going to get better? And when you hear of the numbers, they're like, oh, to fix this issue, it was supposed to be 170 years, but now it's going to be 200 and something. And then you make the really dark joke of, is the planet going to be around that? Right? So at least women will be treated as equal by the time bus.
Will we achieve gender equality?
This is an awkward laugh, by the way. This isn't
so when you look at it on the grand scheme of things, I believe this is a human problem. Like this is at the ground level, a human problem. Where does power lie? How do these decisions get made? We all want to believe that we are different from the guy or the girl making the wrong calls in the suit in the corner office. But the fact of the matter is, once you're in the corner office is where you have all the facts. And I was having a conversation with some other folks on my doctoral program to say it'd be really interesting to understand what the cost of being sustainable is. So what is the actual cost to a business to become a sustainable business? And for us on the other end, we're like, change your packaging, stop delivering over 24 hours, and don't use plastic in any of this, and don't use a plane. So make sure it comes by ship or whatever, but make sure the ship, nothing happens in the ocean because we have to save, so we can put all of these guardrails. That significantly drives cost. And right now, in order to be a more sustainable organization, it is very expensive. If we as everyday consumers try to switch to a more sustainable life, it is very expensive. So I think we need to start teaching our students, and that's why we're incorporating it into every course, the difficulty, the nuances of saying, hey, we're a sustainable business, the greenwashing, right? So what information do we have that's real? There's also the sense of activism that comes the minute you say SDGs, right? There's this activist lens. And I always say, when you have extreme activism, it just forces some people on the other side, whether they believe it or not. So we need to use our classrooms to test, like a testing battleground for these debates, so we can pull them. I think the problem with the world is we're very polarized at the moment, right? If you're saying north, I'm going to say south. And I think we need to bring us to a little bit of a middle ground. And I think we need to use our classrooms to have more fact-based conversations in a safe space that allows a person to say, which I hope none of our students are saying, for example, the climate crisis isn't real. Say it so that we can talk to you about why we believe it is, right? So we as a school need to create the space. We need to ensure all of our faculty are equipped to have that difficult conversation. Yeah. Because how would somebody teaching sales management at this stage talk about sustainability? Why is that even important? Like, why is that important? Sales is to get numbers in, to get money in. So how are we converting that conversation? And I think also teaching them that they could be the folks that crack the code. This is how we make money, because at the end of the day, we need to make money. But this is how we're truly solving one of those very many things. And I will close by saying we can't fix everything. And I think it's also teaching our students that we're not going to win every battle we go to. Because I think that there is a sense of, if you've done 10 things right and one thing wrong, does it cancel everything out? And I think that we need to just readjust what winning this kind of fight we're in this generation with the SDGs, what does that mean? And what is the more realistic view of how we're going to win it, if that makes sense?
And I think even like for us, like at a micro level, like we're on the ground and, you know, every employer we speak to, we are making sure that it's kind of value matching like what we're teaching in class, right? And we can kind of do that as gatekeepers.
Yeah.
And we kind of provide that opportunity that way. But like obviously, you know, they're having these debates in class, and then what they're seeing outside of class is they're mirroring what they're learning inside of class, and then it all just kind of connects together.
Yes. And can I say something on that? That's very interesting, the value match piece, because I am of the belief that our values are never going to be 100% aligned. So sometimes the conversation is, hey, don't go and work for that big oil and gas name because, hey, we're trying to be good to the planet. However, like with any conversation, you cannot have that conversation without the oil and gas folks. And I think they're doing a lot of work to try and be better. And we need these minds that we're kind of honing to say, how do you have that conversation in the space? Because, hey, perhaps they're going in there to make the change, right? So I think that value matching is one thing, but it's really interesting you bring that up, because perhaps the employer doesn't match on paper, but maybe what our student goes in to do is what allows it to match. And it's an interesting one because, like we always say, like packaging, right? For example, this company that shouldn't be involved in plastic, etc. Who's going to change that? And that's what we're saying. We're not saying just go to the good ones.
Yeah.
We're saying make them the good ones. You know what I mean? So
your impact as well,
Your
like
impact,
it's your
yeah.
footprint. This leads me on nicely, I think. So, you know, there's been a large conversation around kind of preparing the students for the world of tomorrow. Where are business schools in the MENA region winning compared to the rest of the world?
that is a really good question.
Thanks.
You asked very good questions, both of you. So I think let's just get an elephant. I don't know if you thought it was an elephant, but let's get it out of the room. Money. We have money in this region, right? There's money to invest. There's a vision that comes with that money. So like I said, as somebody who was born here, never had I assumed that the city would look like this, feel like this, grow at this rate. And I was very happy in small town Dubai, but I'm really grateful that our leaders were not. They were like, no, you can stay in small town Dubai. We're growing. And I remember, I'll never forget the time I left for college, couldn't come home for 3 years. And when I came back, I was like, what in the sci-fi Star Trek land is this, right? It was just like, what on earth? And it was brilliant. And I think that vision and the speed at which they're growing is something else. Obviously, the UAE, we can talk about for hours and hours and hours on how they've grown. Now we've got the advent of Saudi, what Saudi is doing and the transformation that they're going through. It's a really exciting time. You know, we've seen Qatar opening up the World Cup. So there's a twofold conversation. One is that I think it is, you know, not to get too political, but on a global scale, educating outside of some bias that's been held with this region for a really long time because of the openings of doors. So we're building bridges, not walls, that kind of thing, right? Which I think is very, very, very important. So it is good to be able to have a conversation to say, yes, our cultures might go head to head at a few things that are very, very near and dear to our heart. And here's how we move forward from that. I think that conversation is very important. On the other hand, what I think about this region and for business schools and business graduates in this region is that it's smaller. It's just like physically smaller and the economy is smaller. And some people might see that as a bad thing. And they might say, hey, there isn't an opportunity for me because it's small. And I want to say that is 100% false. because it's a small economy, there is a grander opportunity for you to shine, but you have to be that good. You just have to be that good to cut it here. And we've seen it, right? I always say, I've had friends who are in areas that are more creative. So they make their own music and they make their own film. And some of the opportunities they've been able to reach is because we're in the small pond, big fish kind of situation. So I think that if you look at it from the mindset of it's small, there won't be enough. There's more than enough. You just have to be good.
And alternatively, you can create that space for yourself as well if it's not there for you. And we're still in that place. And at this time where you can, like you said, if you use the example of the creatives, like there wasn't that much, but they made that space for themselves and they were able to kind of shine on the back of that. And I think there is still an opportunity for growth for those who just have that kind of entrepreneurial mindset or creative mindset as well, which is really exciting to see.
100%, yeah.
Born through innovation.
You see it from the lens of those that are like, everything must be tech and futuristic and super cool, and you see it on that landscape, and then you see it in furniture makers, and you see it in like coffee shops, and you see like there's this space because we're new. So we have this sense of a developed economy, but we're developing. And that's this really interesting liminal space to live in. We're like, hey, we're not this, we're not that. We get to become. And I think if you come in here with the right mindset, you're focused on results, you're driven, and you're just that good, and you're willing to learn, and you're willing to humble yourself to say, hey, I might be good, but I have this other height to reach. There is a place for you here and you can be that successful. And to your point, Mandy, like you get to shine because it's a new idea, because it's a new space, right? So it's the first time of it being here. And some things just match the region. Like we want gas coming to our car because we forgot to fill gas. That's the kind of place this is. And guess what? Like Hafu's doing amazing, right? So I think that it's a really interesting space. The word luxury means a different thing here. And on the opposite end of that, like we're saying, because of there's a luxury opulence, on the opposite end of that, the more hipster journey of what it means to be in this region is also very unique. So you get to find your footing in both those worlds.
And it is like the land of opportunity for a lot of people.
Yeah.
If we kind of look at all aspects of the society as well. And you see that just from talking to people like on the ground, driving the cars, whatever the case may be. And you get to hear it from all aspects. And I think, we can't discount that either. It's quite important to bring up.
And just to add one final point there, I think the other day we were reading about the government's plans for the future, and I was very surprised to see that one of the key plans there is to have 30 unicorns in the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah,
global
so that's
unicorns.
global unicorns. So that's businesses valued at over 1 billion. So
and
that
what that
is
means
incredible.
Is that they're willing to put
the
resources into that, which I think
Exactly.
is for our students that are entrepreneurial kind of, they've got those entrepreneurial aspirations. This is a really cool place to be at a really cool time. And you have to be the one to leverage that, right? So like we were saying, you have to get out there, you have to meet the right people, you have to have the right ideas, connect with creative minds. And hopefully we're teaching them what you need to think about and what are you not thinking about, and all of the other pieces that we're talking about as well with AI and, sustainable and think of the planet and think of the people and all of that. This is a really cool space for opportunity. Also, we know that things happen very fast.
Yes.
So it's very quick. The output comes out a lot quicker than it would in an older economy. Not because anyone's doing it right or wrong, just because that's the nature. Yeah. We're like, hey, we want to be up there with the rest of these world economies, but guess what? They've had 30, 50, 100, 200 years on you. So now we need to play the game. So we're just going to go really fast.
Well, if we just use that example, like last year when they just switched from the Thursday to Sunday weekend, and literally overnight, it went back to like
January 1st. We're like, what?
Monday to Friday. And that was that. It was like, there was no conversation about it. It was just literally like, we're switching. And it was business as usual the next day. And me being from England, like if that had happened in the UK, that would have been, country would have imploded. And there would have been like, people would have been in uproar. There would have been a crisis for like 3 weeks and people couldn't adjust. But here, it just literally like a click of a switch and it just switched and it was business as usual. And I think it goes back to that thing of like, things happen literally that fast. And You either hear and you roll with it or you leave, unfortunately.
Yeah, and
that's
the
okay.
thing. Yeah,
right?
that's the thing to say to students as a shameless plug for not just Hult on this campus, but this market and this region that I grew up in. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
But it's kind of opened its arms to most everybody, right? So you have the chance to come and make the most of that opportunity. And you have to recognize if that opportunity is for you or not. And we are here kind of to help you recognize what some of those opportunities are. And like we said, you're not going to win everything. You just have to be okay with it and say, hey, this is not for me. It's too fast. Because that is a thing.
Yeah.
I don't know about y'all, but I don't feel time here. Like it is very fast paced. It takes a certain grain to be here. It's like you're running a sprint, but it's a marathon, right? So you're keeping that speed up. And if you don't know how to do that, you're just not, you're not in the race just because you've not been able to keep the speed. And that could be right or wrong. We were talking about burnout very briefly and all of that, but the spaces that we want to go to, and literally in some fields go to space, right? Because we've done that as the UAE as well. The spaces we want to go into and the games we want to play, they're large scale and they're big. And you have to be keeping up that momentum. So it'll always come back to, yes, small economy, huge space for you to be seen. You need to be good at what you're doing.
Now, I really think this leads us really nicely on to our last question. What do you think, Bianca?
Yeah, absolutely. It's time for the wild card question.
It's time for the wild card. So it's 2030. Paint a picture of how business education has been transformed by new tech, AI, metaverse, Web3.
Oh my gosh. What? Okay, 2030.
Hold up, hang on.
Oh, there's more.
There's more. Now, if you would like to hear the answer to this question, you will have to tune into our bonus episode next week. It will be released on Monday, as is all our podcast episodes. So pause right there and tune in next week to hear the answer. Thank you.